Hello, everybody. Welcome to AU4H Radio. This is Real Talk with Donna, Lee, Laurie. We're glad to be here tonight. The topic for tonight is a very serious topic. It's something that's just sitting on our heart, and we really want to, present this in a respectful way. This is Every Child Matters, dealing with the recent news of the residential school in Kamloops, British Columbia, BC, in Canada, right next to the province that I live in. And 215 children's bodies were found in a mass grave, that no one knew were there. And this is a real problem. It's been going on for a long, long time. And so our topic tonight, Every Child Matters, we're talking about residential school and institutional school abuse. And this is something we've talked about before in the past. We've brought it up on topics before with, on different shows at different times because we do cover child abuse issues. But this is in the news. It's fresh in our hearts. It's the wounding is just all over again. I have a special place in my heart for, those children and for those people, the First Nations people, the
I do as
Métis.
well.
Yeah, and it's just heartbreaking to know that there are even more. They suspect that there's many, many more children who will, whose bodies will be found in mass graves, and they they know that there are more. They have found some already, before, but this is just another situation that just happened, and it's just in the news now. So for anybody who hasn't been, haven't heard of it or didn't realize this was going on, it's in the news. It's a Kamloops, British Columbia, in Canada, and it's a residential school that was operating years ago, from the late 1800s or sometime in the 1800s to 1970. And then it closed, and then it became a museum. And the school, they turned it into a museum and stuff. But between when it operated and when it was in operation, this is what we're going to talk about tonight. Is the fact that they forced. This was a religious institution that did this. It was one of the religious groups out there, and they forced the children by law. These children, First Nations children, were stolen from their homes. They were forced to go to these schools, and so this is what we're going to talk about tonight. Very, very heartbreaking.
It is. It's really sad. I,
It is. It's
I
tragic.
guess, like, when I heard it on the news, I guess I was even, like, in shock because it's like the first thing I thought was, how can people be so heartless? Like they're poor innocent children, and you're ripping them away from their parents and their homes and everything they know, and then you're locking them up. You're treating them. You're not even treating them like human beings, and it's heartbreaking. Some of the stories I heard
Yeah.
today on video was just absolutely unreal. Like, I'm sitting there and I'm listening to these people's survivor stories, and it was heartbreaking. It was so hard to believe. And I'm sitting there and I'm crying for these people, just knowing like what they went through and how they suffered and how they were tortured and abused. And children that was killed actually was led to believe that they either ran away or whatever. And one woman was telling her story, and Lori, it was so heartbreaking because she said that she was 9 at the time, and there was a 6-year-old child in the bed next to her, and that child died. And as she
Hmm.
was dying, she was calling out for her parents, and they wouldn't even call her parents. She basically died alone, and they never even told the parents that she had died. And I just thought that was so, I can't even imagine. Like, there's
Yeah.
no words for the way that these people were treated.
No, it's barbaric. And the sad thing is that these institutions um, were there, and they forced those children, the First Nations children, to go to those residential schools because they needed to civilize them.
Yeah.
And it turns out that they were the ones that were uncivilized. The people running those schools. They were the savages. They were the barbarians, not these First Nations children who were innocent little children being ripped from their homes, I mean, I say stolen because sometimes they did take them out of their front, out of their yards. If they saw these children out in their yards, they just take them. But they'd make the parents quite often drop the children off at these schools, and these parents, they knew because a lot of them had gone to those schools themselves, or someone in their family had, and they knew what was going to happen to their children in those schools. But then they would check on their sons, their daughters, to see how they were doing, and they'd say, "Oh, they ran away." The authorities of these residential schools would say, "Oh no, that child ran away. We don't know
Mhm.
where that child is," and it turns out that child was dead,
Yes.
dead and buried. And this breaks my heart. Oh, it breaks my heart. I
Me
can't even
too.
fathom why, like you said, Donna, why someone would do that. Why, how anybody could do that to another living being. But it
Yeah.
happens, and we know that it does. And this is why we keep doing this. This is why we keep talking, and we keep sharing, and we keep, you know, being their voice, because these
Mhm.
children's voices were silenced. Their lives were snuffed out. I mean, these little children were, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, and up, youth. Um, and like some of them ran away, and they'd be caught, and they'd be the RCMP, which is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police up here. In those days, would force them to go back to those schools and take them back, and they would suffer abuse and beatings for running away, and maybe even be murdered, right? So they're investigating now, and there's a new bill that they've brought up, and there's all sorts of, because this just came to light. This is great because there'll be much more done and much more information out there now about the situation, which is good. And because this needs to be brought to light, more and more needs to be brought to light, um, because we need to honor these children. We need to
Yes.
honor them, and we need to respect the First Nations people, and pay tribute and honor the memory of these children who died needlessly at the hands of people who should have been looking after them and taking care of them. They should have been at home with their families, first of all.
Yes.
And then, sadly enough, okay, they're removed from their home to go to these residential schools. They should have been looked after and cared for by those people, not abused and tortured and sexually abused like they were, and then murdered. So, I sit here tonight and my heart breaks for those children and the families that will, they never knew what happened to their children. There were many parents who sat there and just wondered where their child was because the authorities told them that they had run away. And then they find out that they were murdered. And, it just breaks my heart. It really does. So, with the greatest respect, that we can possibly, share with the First Nations people tonight. You are in our thoughts and you're in our prayers. You're in our hearts. Our hearts are breaking and weeping for you. And, you know, since I heard about this, and I heard the news because I live pretty close, I'm just one province away, not that far, just a few hundred miles from where this took place. And we have a lot of First Nations people around us here in Calgary, Alberta, where I live. And resident, like, reserves and all sorts of Native American people here, First Nations. And my heart just breaks for them. It just breaks for them, because they never asked for that. They never asked for trouble. They never asked to be treated like less than a person, like they were non-human because they looked differently or they spoke a different language. Many of those children were abused because they would speak their own language, and then
Yeah.
because they spoke their own language, they would be beaten, or starved or whatever, or just killed. I mean, this is a horrible situation. We know it goes on around the world. It's not just here in Canada or North America. This happened in Central America with the Catholic Church as well. This happened in South America with the Catholic Church many, many years ago. We know this has been going on for a long, long, long time throughout history. This is just coming up in the news now with this Kamloops residential school, and that's why we're talking about it. But this is not a new issue, and it's not
No.
something that people didn't know about. This has been going. This is an ongoing thing that's been brought to light many years ago, And it's just, it's so heartbreaking to know that so many people's lives have been affected by groups, religious groups, whoever they are, even government agencies, and who take no accountability for what they've done to these people, and show no, you know, no remorse for what they've
No,
done to these
none.
people. Um, I mean, like Lee and yourself, Donna, and me sitting here tonight, it's not our fault what happened at Kamloops Residential
Oh,
School.
no, no.
It's not. But the issue is that it's the ancestors who came here before us. It's their doing. It's not our fault. But the thing is we need to honor them and honor their memory, and keep sharing the awareness, because like their slogan, the First Nations people created that slogan with the beautiful the feathers and whatnot, like the beautiful "Every Child Matters" slogan that's on Facebook and circulating around. Some artist probably did that. It's beautiful, and every child matters, and it's just so true. Every child matters.
Every
So
child
that's
does
why
matter.
it's just this is why we're doing what we do because we believe that every child matters, and we really push it. Like most people who
Yes.
know Lee and Donna and myself know that we rarely shut up about child abuse, and long enough to take a breath. Most almost everything that we do, involves some aspect of child abuse prevention awareness, because we know that children are dying out there even still today. You know,
Yes.
um, whether it's a caregiver, a parent, stranger danger, or it's an institution. So, some type of, whether it's a religious institution, governmental institution, whatever, children are dying, and they shouldn't be at the hands of people who are killing them and abusing them, and then they die from the injuries or just right out murder. And this is not okay. It's not okay. It never was okay. It wasn't okay back in the 1870s with the residential schools here in Canada or elsewhere
No,
around the world, and it's not okay now.
no,
We're just willing to say it.
no.
So,
Abuse of
you
any
know,
kind is never okay. I,
no.
like I said, I'm not much of a TV person, but today I literally sat down and I watched news videos, and I was so shocked at the number of people that were affected by it. I was shocked by the number of people that went to these schools and then their children went to these schools, and how the cycle of abuse continued because what was done to them at these schools, they did to their own children. And
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
there was one woman today, and she was kind of speaking out about it, and she said, we didn't know any better. We were took there, and she said we weren't treated very good. And the biggest thing that she kept saying was, she said a lot of the boys, they would separate the boys from the girls, which for sleeping quarters and everything, I understand that. She said, but like the one boy, every time that it seemed like he was always in trouble. She said always in trouble, and she said they would literally beat him in front of the other students so that they would know, this would happen to you. And she said, you dare never want to go to the basement, because if you went to the basement, chances were you weren't coming out of that basement. And
Yeah.
as she's sitting there saying that, it's like, I can't believe it. And then another gentleman, he was 73 years old, and he was talking about his experience. And he was saying about being in the shower. And he said, they were teaching us how to bathe. And he said, we knew how to bathe, but they were showing us. And he said,
Hmm.
it's enough that they show you one time or two time or three times. He said, but then it led to more. And he said, you don't need to be taught how to shower at every second or every day. He said, but what they were doing was they were sexually assaulting these boys in the showers. And
Hmm.
he said he almost hated to shower because he knew what was going to happen to him,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it just, Lori, like I'm in shock. I don't even know what to say tonight because I cannot believe that people would treat other human beings, whether they're different or not.
Yeah.
I see people. I don't see colors. I don't see sexes. I don't see. I see people, and I judge people. If you're good to me, I'm going to be good to you, and that's kind of like my motto in life. I don't care if
Hmm.
you're black, white, straight, or gay. None of that means anything to me. You're, what what your religion is does not matter, what your background is. We are all from different parts of the world. We all have different things that we bring forward.
Mm-hmm.
But to just literally like judge people, I'm not that person. I don't judge anyone. And I taught my children to be the same way. A lot of people say, oh, they see things in black and white. I don't. I see life in shades of gray. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that if everyone walked through life just not judging everyone and not putting a, what word am I looking for? Like putting the, like, oh, well, he's a black man or he's a white
Like
man, or
labeling.
label
Yeah.
people. Yes, exactly. Thank you. And
Yeah.
if people would stop labeling and they would just say that man or that woman, or it's like they always have to push this label on everybody. And it's like the label's got to stop. We got to realize that people are people, human beings are human beings. And these poor little children, they didn't deserve what happened to them.
No.
They did not in any way, shape, or form. But I guess what gets me the most is how can anyone, and I mean anyone, do those horrible things to a child and then look at themselves in the mirror and think that that's okay?
I just. I
I'll
don't.
never understand. I'll never get it.
No, I don't either. I don't understand how people can abuse anyone, let alone a helpless child. You know, like, it's just incredibly wrong, what these children went through. And, they were, you know, they were, they lost their culture. They lost their identity. You know, the First Nations people, because, they were told, you can't pray to the God that you pray to, and you can't speak your language, and you can't, you know, do the same things, as far as customs go. You have to do it our way. And look what it's done to them. Look what it's done to their population. It stripped them of their own identity. Who are
Yes.
they? You know, it's really heartbreaking that like humankind, does this to each other. It's like, oh, you're not like me, so you need to change. Um, you know, it's whoever has the power over the next group to say, okay, you're not like us, so we need to make you like us. You need to become like us in order for us to be able to tolerate you. It, that's not right. And it's been
No.
going on since time began. And
Mhm.
it's like, when is this madness going to stop? Um, Nobody fits into that box. Not one of us.
No.
You know, we're all different. We all come from different backgrounds, and to try to put somebody and label somebody and put them in a box and say that they're a heathen or they're not civilized, or we need to teach them. Like, that's not okay. What's great is their language has come back. It's made a comeback, and they are actually teaching that in schools now, the First Nations languages, and as well as the Inuit and all that. So that's great. Other people can learn it too if you want to. It's a real language, and so the language is coming back, the customs are coming back, the art's coming back. The younger generations are getting back into the traditions of their ancestors,
Yes.
and Lee knows a lot about First Nations, a lot more than I do, and I think we should let Lee go ahead and speak. Say what she wants to say.
Mm. And they say that up to 6,000 children have died, in Canada.
Yeah.
But you gotta know that the number is far greater than that. I mean, there were like 150,000 children from the ages of at least 4 on up who were forced to go to the schools, who were forced into the residential schools and forced to assimilate to white culture. Um, and their hair, which is is a very deep part of Native American spirituality. Their hair was cut. They were forced to cut the hair upon entering the schools, or Shortly thereafter, they were not allowed to talk to each other. Whether, if there are siblings there, they weren't allowed to talk to each other.
Yeah.
There, there's so many things that they did under the guise of the disguise of, you know, teaching them. There were lies, deceits. The abuse was unbelievably rampant. The 215 children that were whose remains were discovered in the mass grave. Um, there's so many more out there. This is incomprehensible that people can do this to one another simply because they're a different culture. And my skin is on the paler side, but my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, his mama was a full-blooded Cherokee. And I don't have paperwork or anything at this point, but I can only imagine the horrors that she and her family had to live through. When I read about this, and I wonder how many more children are they going to find, and there will be children
Yeah.
whose remains they'll never find.
No.
Yeah.
um,
That's right.
it's children. You talked on about reading, listening to the stories, and reading the stories of those who survived. There was one story that I had read earlier today about um, a man who had gone there to the Kamloops Indian Residential School, and he remembers a lot of the pain that they had to endure. There's so many stories out there, and the important thing is that we need to listen to their stories.
Hmm.
It is
Yes.
important that we pay attention, and it is important that we work together and ensure that this doesn't happen to any more children, to any more families. Kids were stolen from their front yard. They were kidnapped and forced to the schools. Um, there was there's so many different stories out there, and it's heartbreaking. It's unbelievably heartbreaking when when the kids will run away from the schools and try to get away from the abuse. They were brought back. They were beaten in front of their peers, humiliated in front of them by making them pull down their pants or um, you know, expose their backside so they can be beaten in front of their peers. Their hair was cut. The food, the education um, was very, very poor. The food on the plates of the children were, I don't know, all I can think of is mush compared
Yeah.
to, the grand feast that the teachers and the instructions and the instructors and the others at the school, the adults, they ate very well. The children ate very poorly. They didn't
Saw
learn
that.
very well. They weren't taught. They weren't allowed to speak in their own native language.
Yeah.
They were forbidden from doing that. They were forbidden from doing anything that had to do with their culture. And the whole purpose of these schools, and there were, oh my goodness, well over, I don't even know how many there were. There were
There's so many.
hundreds of
Too
schools.
many.
They were created for the purpose of forcing these beautiful Native American children, the indigenous people, into assimilating into white culture. And
Yeah.
they forced them to assimilate no matter what it took, and abused them in every way imaginable. And the impact on their language and their culture that they were forced to drop, forced to leave behind, is just, it impacts on generations, on the generations after them. And
Yeah.
this has been happening to the indigenous people for many decades, many decades. Like I think Lori mentioned, from the 1700s, um, and it's still happening. It is still happening,
Yeah.
in residential schools. Um, there were, they were forced to speak English. They were forced to learn English. They were forced to dress like white people and deny who they are, and
Mm-hmm.
but who they
Their
are,
history.
you know, who the Native American children were, and the survivors that made it through the horrors, who they are is in their spirit, but their spirit was really, it was trodden on. It was, they tried to kill them. They tried to kill their
Yeah.
spirit,
Yeah.
you know,
That's what
and
abuse does. Yeah. Kills
I know
kills a
there were
person.
over, I think they said 350 of those, of the schools in, I'm sorry, across the states. There were more than 350 residential schools created, Native American boarding schools. They were established across 30 different states. And, you know, not many of those kids chose to go there voluntarily. They say some chose, some went voluntarily, but I don't see that. I just, not with everything that's coming out. It
Yeah.
is, it is heartbreaking for the families, for the loved ones, and for those who have survived and what they have to live with. You know, the traumas, the impact of all that trauma on them as children, um, still has many of those survivors living in fear. And, you know, no one should have to live in fear. Children should not have to be afraid. Um,
Yeah.
and a lot of those schools, they were run by government people. They, many of them were purchased from the Catholic, um, I don't want to say diocese, if that's the correct word, but many of them were purchased because they were run by a lot of nuns and priests. In fact, one of the stories that I had started to read about, the person, the survivor, they shared that they were taken right from their front yard by a
Mm.
nun and a priest. They were taken right from the front yard while they were playing, and, you know, rushed into a
Stolen.
car and just kidnapped and taken to the school. And
Unbelievable.
their parents, their
Yeah, it's
guardians, their
crazy.
loved ones, nobody had a say in it. They have a voice, um, but they weren't allowed to use it. They were squashed. They were forbidden from, you know, being able to make any decisions. And, you
Mm-hmm.
know, we have to sit down, sit back, listen to these stories, pay attention to what happened,
Mm-hmm.
and acknowledge the traumas, acknowledge the horror and the traumas that these children lived through, and ensure that it doesn't happen again. You know, this is 20, we're in 2021 now, you know, but it's still happening. Um, we
Yeah.
can do better. We must do better.
Yeah.
The children deserve better. The families deserve better. Um, and, you know, I'm sorry.
No,
um,
that's okay.
this is very, it's very painful. You know, it's painful
It
to
is.
learn about what they went through. And I can't even begin to imagine how they feel, the
No.
survivors, you know, those who made it through. I can't even begin to imagine. So, I'm going to pass on to one of you ladies at the moment while I gather myself. This is pretty just, this is incredibly upsetting. It's distressing.
It is.
It
And,
is.
you know, we've got to do anything and everything we can in our power to,
That's right.
to help, help everyone heal, to allow them to heal. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of resources as well, which that they were had access to for a long time. But we've got to do everything we can to ensure that this doesn't happen again
That's right.
to any more children. You know, I know there's thousands of kids out there still buried, and
Yes.
unfortunately, their
Mm-hmm.
bodies may never be found. You know, their remains may never be found, which
Yeah.
leaves their families not being able to rest and their souls not being able to rest in peace. So I'm going to turn that to one of you ladies.
Thank you, Lee. It is heartbreaking. I've been sitting around all day, actually for days since I heard about it. I was shocked. It's not like abuse shocks any of us. The three of us, because we've dealt with child abuse stuff. Like Lee and myself are survivors, so we've dealt with it our whole lives. But also, we've been dealing with this for years, fighting against child abuse. So obviously, it's not shocking. But when I saw the post on Facebook, immediately my heart just sank. It just sank. I felt the weight of the despair of the families, of the children that had been in that school, in that Kamloops residential school. You can hear their posts and you can read what they're saying, and you hear the pain in their voices and what they're saying. And, they're not coming back with a hateful message. They're coming back
No.
with, we need help to heal. We need help to honor their memory. Let us together honor their memory and let this not happen again. It's my heart I immediately wanted to go there to be with them. And, they were inviting people to come along and join in the ceremonies that they were holding for these children, in this mass grave that they found, the 215 bodies. And they were going to have drumming and singers, and they were going to do, traditional First Nations, ceremony for these children. I so wanted to be there with them. And I thought, well, the only way I can be there with them is in spirit, because, in my heart, I'm with them. And I think that's where the three of us, our hearts are with them here tonight. My heart's been heavy ever since I heard the news. I haven't really thought about much of anything else, and because my mind is fixed on the heavy loss, and just knowing that there's going to be more, because now there's a call to actually search out all the residential schools and search out all the grounds and find all the lost bodies of these children that died in these schools that were unreported deaths. These were not reported.
Yeah.
They were not recorded. They didn't record these deaths. They killed these children and buried them out in the backyard, is what they did. And so, this is heartbreaking, and all of us have felt the effects from this, the three of us. When we came out, just before we came on the show tonight, we were like, our hearts are heavy. It's not going to be a fun show. It's not fun to talk about this. We want to be respectful and honor these people, the survivors, first of all, of, any residential school, the First Nations people, and also the families for all of these children that have been lost through the ages, taken away from them, stolen, and murdered, and they never knew what happened to their family member. And so my heart's just broken, and I've been having a hard time keeping it together actually since I heard about this. Lee, it's understandable. Everybody's upset about this, and we should absolutely be upset about this. Yeah,
We really should be.
Yeah.
My thing is I heard them stories, and like, I'm in shock that, like, I'm actually lost for words, and that don't happen very often. But like, the things that these people were saying that they went through, it just makes me wonder, like, we see abuse every day from people that abuse children or neglect children. But to know that these people took these children, they stole them, they degraded them, they abused them severely, whether it be physically, mentally, sexually. But like, they had no value of their little lives. They just threw them away like trash, like they were worthless. And I'm so shocked by that. Like I said, I'm lost for words, because it's like, I don't understand how someone can treat a child so bad. I don't understand how anyone can treat another human being bad. But to treat a child, to mistreat a child, or to hear these stories about how they were fed, and like the little that they got. And the one story that really got to me today was the one girl couldn't eat vegetables. Every time she did, she would be sick to a degree. And the woman said that she was I guess their beds were side by side, and she slept by her. And she said, this little girl, every time we get sick, she said they would literally make her eat her own vomit.
Mm,
That just, that got to me. It's like, I can't even imagine. I have kids and I have grandkids, and I look at them and I think, there is nothing I wouldn't do for them. There's nothing I wouldn't do for any child.
yeah.
But to literally know that someone could do that, to force a child to eat their own vomit or to
Mm,
physically abuse them or sexually assault them, it gets to me. I mean, they were through so much and they were ripped away from their families. They had no one. They were told if their child ran away their child ran away, that, and really their child was killed, or
yeah.
tortured. And it just, I don't know, like I feel so bad. Like, I, my heart goes out. I'm just, honestly, I'm lost for words tonight.
Yeah, I know it's so heartbreaking.
You just can't imagine what they went through.
It's just to me that's torture. That's systematic torture. That's disregard for human life, and that's a crime against humanity. And
Yeah.
it's like this is not okay, but we know even today it's still going on around the world. We're talking
Mhm.
like worldwide. Um, and when are people going to change the way that they feel about children and about other people? When are we going to change that? Like, how many more generations have to go through this? Like, this is not okay. It's
No,
not okay to do this to children.
it's not
Um,
okay.
and it doesn't matter, where the child's from. It makes no difference.
Well,
Children are children all around the
that's
world.
that's what
Why
I
would?
said earlier. I see people. That's what I don't understand. Like, they looked at these little children because they were Native American. And to me, it's like, a child's a child. I don't care if you're black, white, purple, pink, or blue. A child's a child. A human being, a person's a person. And to really just to treat them like that because they wanted to beat the savage out of them, or they wanted to, make them civil. I
Yeah.
just, I can't fathom that. I'm sitting here and I'm trying to, like, put into words, like, I cannot believe that they would even think that a child was a savage. An innocent
Hmm.
child was a savage. It just, like I said, it's unreal. I know that this happened, but it's like, it's so hard to believe.
Yeah. I mean, I've read a lot of material on this particular subject, and because I'm interested in history and I do a lot of reading, and that was the mentality of those people back in those days, and it was a very backward
What
way of
possessed
thinking.
them to be so mean and rotten and hateful to children?
Well, I don't. I think that they thought they were doing the right thing in their mind. They thought that the Native American population, needed to be civilized like they were, and they needed to, to live life like they did. So in other words, okay, your life is different than ours. So that's what I was saying earlier. They looked at them and they said, okay, you need to live like us. You need to change your way of living. You need to talk our language. You need to get rid of your customs. You need to lose your history and all your culture, and you need to become one of us, right? And that's basically what it's called, assimilation, and that's what a culture. That's what the cultures do to take over a people. They've been doing it for
It's
many
sad.
years. Yeah, and it's happened throughout history. I mean, it happened back in the old days with the Persians. I mean, we're talking if you study history, like it's there, right? But the thing is we should know better now. This is 2021, and we've said this on several shows. It's 2021. Let's wake up and smell the coffee. How we've got the technology, we've got the information. Let's change this, right? Why is this still happening? And it's like we know it's still happening around the world because this is the way that people are still doing abusing children, and they're still trying to assimilate other cultures and take them over. And it's just like, why is this still going on? I don't understand. But it's sad, and it never should have happened. And my heart
Yeah.
goes out to those people. Like I was saying earlier, like you said, they wanted to because they thought they were savages. They thought they were civilizing them. And what I said earlier, I was like, they're the ones that were the savages. They
Exactly.
they were the ones that were uncivilized, stealing and kidnapping children and forcing them to go to residential schools so that you can beat them and torture them and sexually abuse them.
I
That's
think they knew what they
savage.
were doing. I think they knew what they were doing and they covered it up to justify their actions, to make it okay.
Yeah, and I mean sadly enough, institutions have been doing that for a long time. Not just the religious institutions, but government institutions too. It's a problem, and that's why we have human rights boards and we have human rights governing agencies and stuff now because we're starting to wake up to the fact that this is not okay. But the thing is like, um, back especially in those days. I mean, that's sad because that's late 1800s. I mean, that's not that long ago. My grandparents were born in the late 1800s. My great grandparents were born in the mid 1800s. That just tells you there's not that many generations in my family, and it's like it hasn't been that long. In other words, for some people it has, but for me it hasn't because my family all had children late in life and they lived to be really old people. So, 1800s. I mean, that's not that long ago, and it's like it's sad that that was going on in those days. I mean, even the 1600s, 1700s, this was going on. But now there's, especially the stuff in the 1800s, there are more records of it. It's easier to get a hold of the records, and they still manage to try to bury the records with the children. They
Yes.
said that I was reading some of the articles, the news articles and stuff that's out there, and they said that record keeping was a problem. They didn't keep track of a lot of the children, and they didn't keep track of why and how they died, and the names of those that died. And so a lot of those children in those graves, they will never know
They'll never know who they are.
how, necessarily the information surrounding their death, right? And it's just heartbreaking. It's horrifying. And as a people group, that's what broke my heart because, thinking about the First Nations people up here, because I do live very close with them. They live right in my area, in my city. And, to think about them as a people group, in their culture, in their, the love, for um, their own culture, their own people, their own language, and their own history, to see this heavy blow that's been dealt them again, again and again and again. It just breaks my heart because there's no excuse for that. There never was any excuse for that. And there isn't one today.
No.
There's no excuse for, thinking that we can, that we should be allowed, anybody, I'm saying we as a people, anybody should be allowed to just decide that they're going to just take over a group of people and say, look, we're going to change you. We're going to do that through your children. Get your children in here. We're going to change them. They're no longer be able to speak their language. They can't worship who you used to worship. You're going to have to worship who we worship. And you can't be who you used to be. You have to be like us. I mean, that's
I can't
just,
even imagine.
to me, that's so wrong. It's just so wrong. I don't like anybody putting me in a box, so I know that they don't like that either. Nobody does. We're all
No.
individuals, and we've always, people are always doing that, and they always have, tried to put everybody into some sort of category, right? And that's just not okay. And my heart, like I said, my heart just breaks for those people. I'll never know. I mean, I was abused, but we all know what it is to hurt. We
Yeah.
all know what it is to hurt and to feel pain and rejection. I mean, everybody's been rejected at some point. Everybody knows what it is to feel loss and sorrow and hurt and pain. But when we're talking about a people group and a nation like the First Nation people, they know firsthand what it is to hurt as a people who have who were basically tried to be annihilated as a people. It's like, okay, you can be around us and you can live with us, but you have to do it our way, is what the culture of the day said. Whether you want, it doesn't matter what color you want to call it, white culture, or, the Anglos, or whatever you want to call it, the people who were, our ancestors who were here during that time, who made those decisions. They wanted to force them to change to be like them, right? And my heart just breaks for them because they've had to find themselves. I watched many documentaries over the years about, listening to them talking about their culture and how hard it was for them to try to find to find themselves and to find their culture again, and to once again know who they are as a people, and to, you know, hold on to those old traditions that they had, which were so meaningful and so powerful, you know. And so this is, I'm glad that they, you know, they've done a lot of great work to try to, you know, reach the young people to pick, you know, to get that going again, to revive the nation, the First Nation people. That's wonderful. So, you know, I think that's awesome. But in the meantime, then we have this sort of thing happening, and it's just another blow to them, as a people group. And my heart, like I said, our hearts are with them. Our hearts are with all of you if you're listening, and you know you're a Indigenous First Nations person, and you know, you're sitting here listening to this. You can know, you know, our hearts are with you. I just, you know, I grew up abused, so I know what abuse is all about. But the thing is abuse. That type of abuse is different because not only were they abusing those children, but they were abusing to the very core who they were,
Yes.
because they were a certain a nation of people, and they just tried to destroy that out of them, and turn them into something else. So those people were not only abused; the ones that survived then had to go on and have to learn how to exist in a world that tried to wipe them out as a people and as a culture, and tried to destroy their language and everything that made them and identified them as who they were. You know, so yeah, my heart's always been with the First Nations people, because I've been keeping my eyes open my whole life to what's been going on, and you know, it's incredibly sad. It's just incredibly sad that we as people, you know, humankind on the planet, can't treat each other better. It's just
That
like, and especially children.
that's what I said. I don't
You know,
understand how people can just be so vicious and spiteful and hateful to children. I mean, those stories that I heard today, they were surreal.
hmm
You know, from the moment they got there, they were stripped, their hair was cut, they weren't allowed to speak their language. They weren't allowed to know if they had siblings. They weren't allowed to speak. The one
hmm
gentleman said that he actually saw his sister and he went over and hugged her. And he said they literally stripped him right in front of everyone. He said there was boys and girls there at the time, and they literally beat him with this whip. And he said that was to teach other students they weren't supposed to talk if they knew somebody. How can you do that? It just, like I said, Lori, I'm at a loss for words because I just cannot imagine doing that to children. I can't imagine abusing children or sexually assaulting children. I just, and to kill children
it's
and
evil.
bury them and have no remorse and no one takes any accountability for their losses or for their murders. It just, it's
It's evil.
unbelievable. It's evil. It is evil.
Yeah,
Like I
there's no other
said,
word for it.
my heart is heavy tonight. I'm lost for
hmm
words because I don't even know how to react or what to say because I cannot believe that we as human beings treat other human beings, especially children, in the manner that they did, and no one's saying anything about it. It was just left go all those years. Those children were just buried and forgotten.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the heartbreaking thing.
You
It's
know,
kind of
where's
like,
the accountability? Even to
yeah,
this day, what is upsetting to me is, and unless something's changed since we went on the air, um, the church has not taken any accountability whatsoever for these actions. They haven't said anything, and it's
Hmm.
like, when do you say something? When do you take accountability? When do you acknowledge what you allowed?
I think until they have more proof, they probably won't say anything. Eventually, they probably will, but I think right now they're going to wait until they get talk to some people and figure out how to best handle it. The government of Canada is actually acknowledging this, and you know, already setting up groups to deal with this. So there's lots happening behind the scenes right now up here. You know, we're just talking about it as three women who care, real
Yeah.
talk. But there is a lot of news, so if anybody's interested in this, you can find that there is a lot going on. Um, and there's agencies actually being set up to actually deal with this and to help the First Nations people and to start looking at all of the residential schools that are known, that they know of. They said there were schools that were there that they really can't even remember. They can't keep track of where they were because they've been lost throughout history. So there's more. There will always be more. But the ones that they actually know of, they're going to comb them with that ground radar technology, and they're going to look for mass graves. They're going to try to find them, try to find them all. So there is work being done, and there'll be a lot more done. But we just wanted to come on and talk to from our hearts, because
Yes.
we care about children, and we care about all children. And I love that the saying, the little, the logo that they came up with was "Every Child Matters," and that just, to us, we always talk about that every child matters. And when I saw that, I was just like, we have to do a show on this because every child matters.
Yeah.
Every single child matters.
Yes, they do.
And I wish more people would feel the same way so we could stop and prevent child abuse. But unfortunately, the world is very sick, and there are a lot of people out there who don't mind hurting children and killing them. But we're going to keep saying it. Every child matters. I know Lee has something that she wants to say here. She wanted to add in.
Traditions, cultures, and the sacred way of life. Those things are all handed down from the elders, to the generation after them, and a lot of that got lost, with the children who died as a result of the horrendous abuses and the severe punishment that was inflicted upon them simply because they're indigenous people, they are Native American, and that they were not white. And, they have voices. The survivors, so many survivors out there, many of them will not choose to talk about what happened to them because it is far too painful to revisit all that trauma. And there are others who are speaking out, and, so that others can become educated and learn from what they survived. And, just take the time um, to listen, to watch, to hear, to read their stories. Know that they are extremely painful stories. There's trauma that they are revisiting from their past. So just take your time and just be warned and just be kind. Be kind to others. It doesn't take anything to be kind. Nothing at
No.
all. And every child matters. Absolutely every child matters.
That's
But
right.
take the time to listen to their stories and, get educated, whether you're, I don't know, I lost the words. I apologize. Um, but take the
That's
time
okay.
to do all that, to get
Yeah.
educated, and know that a lot of their culture and their stuff it is handed down by the elders, and it's oral tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, you know some cultures, or you may have books on how to do this, how to do that, this culture, this tradition, but um, a lot gets lost because they weren't able to, share it. They weren't able
Mm-hmm.
to pass that on because the children were killed. And we need to do something. We need to do a lot better. We need to just
Mm-hmm.
stand up, speak out. We need to pay attention to those who are sharing their stories, and to share and to pray. Um, However, each of you out there who is listening or watching, however you pray, and
Yeah.
talk to your Creator, talk to the Great Spirit. Um, my heart is incredibly broken, and my spirit is heavy. Um, these are tragedies that could have been prevented. They
Mm-hmm.
absolutely could have been prevented. These children were killed for simply being alive and being
Mm-hmm.
Indian,
Yeah.
and that's unacceptable. And we can't allow that to continue. We can't allow it to happen again.
Mm.
No.
So, okay.
No. And that's why it's so important. Everybody. It needs to take a stand. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. We all have to be a voice for children. And like you said, Lori, every child matters.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Um, Tonight we are with a heavy heart. We're at loss for words. As you noticed throughout the show, we have so much that we want to say and that we think, but it's extremely hard because our hearts are hurting for these families, these people.
Mm-hmm.
But we do thank you for joining us, and we will be keeping these families in our thoughts and our prayers. We invite you to join us back next week. If you have any questions or want any information about AU4H or AU4H radio, the information is in the description, or you can visit us at www.au4h.weebly.com. We thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to joining you all next week. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Have a great night, everybody.
Bye bye.
Good night.